Under the gilded arches of Jefferson Academy, two toxic beliefs quietly festered: that a black girl must be fabricating stories about her father's work at the Pentagon, and that legacy schools are immune to any threats to national security. Both illusions shattered on that very Parents' Day. When Miss Anderson's smug smile froze in mid-lecture, Jonathan Carter stepped into the classroom, not as the janitor or low-level maintenance worker everyone assumed, but as the mastermind behind some of America's most critical defense protocols. His daughter, Maya, watched in stunned silence as the truth exploded like an earthquake, setting off a chain of events no one saw coming. Jonathan hadn't come merely to clear his daughter's name. He'd come to confront a danger that had quietly infiltrated this very institution, a place where privilege ruled until that privilege was stripped away by a top security badge and the courage of a father-daughter team. Moments earlier, Maya Carter had stood before her mirror, straightening the collar of her Jefferson Academy uniform, a crisp white blouse, structured navy skirt, and the tiny enamel crest that proclaimed her membership in this world of entitlement, where any mistake is magnified and any achievement by an outsider is rendered almost invisible. Maya was the only black student in a classroom full of polished faces descended from powerful families, children of politicians, CEOs, and captains of industry. Even before she passed through the school gates, rows of luxury cars parked beneath ancient oaks weighed on her steps. Her glossy black shoes could not hide the isolation she felt. Each footfall was met with curious, scrutinizing eyes from classmates who shared her uniform but inhabited entirely different worlds. At Jefferson Academy, Maya had learned to don armor every single day. She forced herself to stand tall so no one could glimpse her fear. She laughed on cue, remained silent when necessary, and answered teachers' questions in a voice neither too loud nor too soft, just enough to avoid undue attention. But deep down, Maya knew. One slip, one honest remark about her life or her father's work, even if true, could become the punchline to someone else's joke. At home, she was a different person. Maya was her father, Jonathan's pride and joy, his quiet daughter, whose eyes reflected both love and intelligence. After long days, he would wrap her in a hug and teach her about the value of truth, the strength of self-respect, and the need to protect oneself in an unfair world. In the evenings, Maya would sprawl on the couch, sharing every classroom triumph and every silent wound with him. Yet the boundary between home and school remained an icy chasm. In school, Maya was a shadow, sometimes entirely invisible, among names that carried weight, cliques that boasted Paris vacations, five-star birthday parties, and new supercars. Should she ever speak candidly about her life or her father's Pentagon role, that truth would instantly become fodder for ridicule, doubt, or unwanted pity. That morning, as Maya passed through Jefferson's black iron gates, she told herself, "Be strong. Pretend you don't care." But each sideways glance from a classmate, each raised brow from a homeroom teacher, every hush of laughter behind her back felt like a pinprick to her heart, leaving her more exhausted than ever. At this school, Maya knew she would always have to become someone else just to survive. Yet she wondered, when would she ever be free to simply be herself in this frozen world? The morning chill at Jefferson Academy seemed never to leave Maya's bones, even after she'd stepped through the front door and slammed it shut behind her. Yet, in the little kitchen, warmed by the scent of toast and sizzling eggs, Maya found a touch of comfort, a rare pocket of peace all her own. Jonathan Carter sat at the table, every bit as steady and composed as ever. He was absorbed in the morning briefing on his tablet, his sharp eyes flickering with thought so deep that Maya, perceptive though she was, could never fully fathom them. Breakfast unfolded in a fragile calm. Jonathan placed a plate of eggs in front of his daughter and asked gently, "Ready for today, sweetheart?" Maya nodded, tucking a loose curl behind her ear before offering a small smile. "Miss Anderson wants the whole class to do presentations on our parents' careers. I'm going to talk about you working at the Pentagon." Jonathan's brow tightened for a moment, but he quickly masked his concern with a reassuring smile. "Remember what I told you. Sometimes it's safest not to share everything. The less people know, the better you're protected. But I'm proud of you." Maya's eyes lit up with an eager mix of pride and longing, the hope of being seen and understood. To Maya, revealing the truth about her father's work wasn't just a class assignment. It was her only way to stake out her place in a world that expected her to shrink herself among all those powerful legacies and cold judgments. It was her silent answer to every doubtful glance and every whispered rumor. "My father is nobody's janitor or campus guard," as they sneered at during last year's parent meeting. Jonathan simply gazed at his daughter, his eyes saying more than words ever could. Then he reached across the table and patted her hand, smiling softly. "As long as you know I love you and I'm proud of you, that's all that matters." On the drive to school, Maya pressed her shoulder against the window, watching the world blur by. Her father's old sedan looked small and out of place, nestled among rows of gleaming luxury cars, with their special license plates and impeccably dressed drivers holding doors open like royal ushers. Maya gripped her backpack strap tightly, forcing a smile even as her chest tightened. A silent reminder of the invisible, merciless line that separated her from their world. Miss Anderson, Maya's homeroom teacher, had been Jefferson Academy's standard-bearer for over 20 years. Tall and always perfectly coiffed, blonde hair swept into a neat chignon, wardrobe filled with designer labels. She wore a kind smile, but her eyes cut like knives, concealing bias behind a carefully crafted veneer. The entire class and their parents knew Anderson favored the children of distinguished politicians and corporate titans. For Maya, Anderson's warmth always felt superficial, her indifference barely concealed beneath polite words. True encouragement was rare. Maya usually got perfunctory comments like, "Keep trying," or, "Oh, Miss Carter's daughter, right? Your dad's the security guard?" Anderson never raised her voice or displayed overt contempt. She wielded her judgment through sidelong glances, subtle dismissals, and objective remarks that made Maya feel perpetually out of place. In a room full of fair-haired students in pristine uniforms, Maya's presence was like a solitary brushstroke of color on Anderson's perfect canvas. That difference made her a target. Always under scrutiny, always one misstep away from becoming the textbook example of a child who didn't quite belong. Stepping into the classroom, Maya felt the undercurrent of that frozen hostility. Then Layla, her rare friend, hurried over, took her hand, and whispered, "I can't wait until the day the class really hears your story. Just as you deserve." Maya squeezed Layla's hand, silent pride blooming in her chest. She was still the outsider here, but today, for once, she hoped her truth wouldn't be a punchline. She prayed it would be the moment she stood tall enough to be seen. The bell announcing the start of class chimed softly, but to Maya it sounded like the gavel of an impending sentence. She inhaled deeply, clutching her stack of index cards, and told herself, "Today, I have to be brave. Even if it's only once, I want to stand as myself in front of everyone." Layla offered her an encouraging smile, but Maya could feel all the strange, anticipatory gazes aimed at her from the teacher's desk, where Miss Anderson was already waiting. Miss Anderson swept into the room, her golden hair threaded with a few silver strands, thin-framed glasses lending her an air of authority, and her tailored gray dress both elegant and exacting. With a measured glance, she scanned the room, lingering ever so slightly on Maya, her look all but invisible to anyone but Maya herself. The teacher's lips curved into a polite, by-the-book smile, one Maya knew well as the face-polite, heart-elsewhere expression she'd worn for years. "Good morning, everyone," Miss Anderson announced, her voice cool enough to hush the class in an instant. "We'll begin today's presentations on our parents' careers in alphabetical order." Destiny had never seemed to favor Maya. Carter always sat at the top of the list. Miss Anderson checked her tablet and nodded. "Maya Carter, you're first." Silence swept the room, every pair of eyes turning toward Maya. Her legs trembled, but she stood straight, shot Layla a quick glance, then stepped to the front in a supreme effort to mask her nerves. "My name is Maya Carter," she began, voice steady. "Today, I will be talking about my dad's job." She paused to breathe, her eyes shining with pride despite the fear. "My father works at the Pentagon." An eerie hush followed, and then Tyler, the blonde-haired boy who always acted superior, snorted and burst out laughing. "The Pentagon? Really? Sounds fancy. So does he clean toilets there?" A chorus of boys behind him erupted in laughter, their jeers slicing through Maya's fragile pride like knives. What began with Tyler quickly spread until the entire class buzzed with mockery. Maya found herself unwilling star of a cruel spectacle. Even worse, Miss Anderson, the one person who should have shielded her, stood with arms crossed, a half smirk on her lips. She didn't intervene. She fanned the flames. "Oh, Maya," she cooed, the tone equal parts taunt and feigned concern. "So is your dad the President of the United States? Or maybe the CIA director? You're serious, right?" Her words dripped with both condescension and a manufactured sweetness, simultaneously egging on the ridicule and undermining Maya's worth. The classroom morphed into a stage where teacher and students exerted the power of the majority to bury the truth of one vulnerable child. Maya froze, tears welling in her eyes. Her small hands trembled as she gripped her note cards to keep from breaking. Lip quivering, she forced out, "My dad works in Pentagon security. He really does." The laughter grew louder, the cruel whispers more venomous. "She's got quite the imagination. Must be a janitor's kid or something. Bet she doesn't even know what he really does." At last, Layla could take no more. She sprang to her feet, voice ringing out, "Cut it out! Maya isn't lying. Her dad really does work there." Miss Anderson snapped back, icy and authoritarian. "Layla, sit down. If you keep this up, step outside. And Maya, you may return to your seat. Next time, please stick to facts rather than fairy tales in front of the class." The room collectively turned away, leaving only Layla to grasp Maya's hand as she trudged back to her desk. Maya fought the urge to cry. Her chest felt constricted, breaths shallow, the world around her dissolving into a blur of laughter, hushed snickers, and Miss Anderson's disdainful glance. Up front, Miss Anderson moved on to the next presenter. Her tone warm and friendly as she listened to the children of powerful families describe lives of bankers, high-powered attorneys, and members of Congress. But for Maya, truth had become a cruel joke, a living proof of the deeply rooted prejudice held by the adults around her. Behind her, Layla squeezed Maya's hand softly, but even that small gesture couldn't shield her friend from the icy grip of a day when the truth, pure and proud, was dismissed as nothing more than a lie in the eyes of the powerful. Miss Anderson's final words felt like a cold blade driving into Maya's chest, and the rest of the school day was pure torment. Every class period, every glance from her classmates was laced with contempt or malicious curiosity. No matter how hard Maya tried to focus, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being examined under an unkind microscope. Every gesture, every look, every breath smothered by an atmosphere thick with prejudice. When the final bell rang, the students poured into the hallway like birds released from a cage, laughter echoing off the lockers. But the whispers and giggles, just loud enough for Maya to hear, pricked her heart like needles. Look, here comes the Pentagon princess. Her dad probably just mops floors there. That's so ridiculous. Who'd ever believe it? Even kids who normally ignored her now sidestepped her as if they feared catching her difference. Tyler's gang went out of their way to brush past, jabbing her shoulder and winking mockingly. "Maya, tell us another story. This is hilarious. Or better yet, have your dad bring his janitor uniform to school tomorrow." Maya lowered her head and let her hand tremble in her pocket. She just wanted to vanish. Without Layla, her only friend brave enough to speak up, she might have broken down in tears right there in the corridor. But at that moment Layla appeared, grabbed Maya's hand, and led her swiftly into the girls' restroom, away from every hateful gaze. Once the door clicked shut, the tiny stall felt like a protective shell. Finally, a place where Maya could let her tears fall. They slid silently down her cheeks, mixing with the steady drip of the faucet. No one heard them, no one saw them, no one cared. "Why am I even here?" Maya whispered, her words thick with sobs. "Why does the truth turn into a lie?" Layla wrapped her arms around her and murmured, "Forget them. Don't cry. They just don't understand." But Layla was helpless too, already feeling the sting of exclusion from other kids simply for standing by Maya. She'd caught side glances and heard snide comments. "So, you're like Maya now? Think you're some kind of hero? Watch out, Ms. Anderson's always watching you two." Maya realized that, at Jefferson Academy, isolation wasn't reserved for her alone. It was an invisible wall, cold and unyielding, erected by the complicity of indifferent stares and adult silence, with Miss Anderson at its center. She didn't need to raise her voice or hurl insults. One dismissive remark, one cutting look, one mocking smile, was enough to brand anyone who challenged the school's perfect image as not belonging. Miss Anderson strolled by the restroom, peered inside, and her cold eyes swept over the two girls. No word of concern, no gesture of empathy, only ruthless indifference. To her, Maya's pain was trivial, even a just lesson for children who didn't know their proper place. As her footsteps faded down the hall, Layla sighed and said, "Stay strong, Maya. Don't let them win. Your dad is your pride. He's not a joke to them." But in Maya's heart, the shame and isolation pressed down, squeezing out every spark of hope. She ached for her father's arms, for a place where she didn't have to pretend to be strong just to survive, a place where her truth wouldn't be a thorn in anyone's side. And once more, Maya wondered, when will this ice finally thaw? When will the hearts around her truly listen to the truth? The loneliness and humiliation clung to Maya well into the evening, like a nameless chill seeping into every corner of their small home. When Maya opened the door and stepped inside, Jonathan Carter was already seated at the dinner table, the soft yellow light casting familiar, thoughtful shadows across his face. The scent of hot food filled the air, but Maya no longer felt hungry. She forced a smile, pretending it was just another ordinary day, though her reddened eyes betrayed her every effort. Jonathan noticed immediately, but he said nothing. He simply added more food to Maya's plate in silence. The dinner hour was heavy with tension. Only the gentle clink of spoon against porcelain and the occasional soft sigh from Maya broke the stillness. At last, she couldn't hold back any longer. Tears streamed down her cheeks, unstoppable. She set down her spoon, her voice trembling. "Dad, today everyone in class laughed at me. They said I was lying. Miss Anderson even mocked me in front of the whole class. They all said you're just a janitor at the Pentagon, Dad. And it's all your fault. You've never come to school for Parent Day. If you had come, if you had stood up for me, they wouldn't have treated me like this." Jonathan sat still, pain flickering in his eyes. He understood. For a child forced to fight each day just to be seen among all those shining names, her pride was her only armor. Yet he also knew that behind Jefferson Academy's polished facade lay dangers that lurked, especially for his family. Gently, he slid his chair closer and took his daughter's cold hand in his own. "Maya, I'm so sorry. I know you've suffered so much because of my job. There are things you can't see. My work isn't like other dads. I can't boast about it. I can't walk you through the school gates on Parent Day, and sometimes I can't even explain why." Maya choked back a sob. "But why, Dad? Why can't you show up? Just once? Can't you do that for me?" Jonathan met her gaze, his voice barely a whisper. "I work for a special security division at the Pentagon, Maya. I protect more than just our family. I protect countless others. There are strict confidentiality rules. If I appeared at the school, it would draw attention, not only to my work, but it could put you in danger. Sometimes keeping our family safe means keeping our most important secrets hidden." Maya had never considered that dark side of success, the unspeakable secrets, the invisible bonds that held her father and her prisoner. Still, the wound in her heart refused to heal. As their painful conversation unfolded, Maya began to notice things she'd once taken for granted. Lately, a black SUV she didn't recognize would park across the street from their house, its headlights flashing intermittently in the night before disappearing. More than once, Maya peeked through her window and saw figures inside the car speaking into walkie-talkies, their eyes scanning toward her home with wary intensity. At the same time, her father's urgent calls from work had grown more frequent, especially late at night. Often, in the middle of dinner, Jonathan would step away to take a mysterious call in his study, locking the door behind him and leaving Maya with questions that went unanswered. One night, she overheard him through the crack of that door. "We can't let any information slip. Security will coordinate another perimeter sweep, increase surveillance measures." The clipped, urgent tone felt so foreign compared to the gentle voice she knew from peaceful evenings. And then there were the strangers Maya sometimes spotted wandering around the neighborhood, dressed inconspicuously, yet their vigilant gazes never left their surroundings. When Maya found the courage to ask her father about them, he merely patted her head and said, "They're just my colleagues conducting a security check. Don't worry about it." Still, the atmosphere at home grew heavier, laden with unspoken taboos. Maya sensed attention in every room, as though forces far larger and darker than the teasing at school were creeping into their lives. She realized that success has a shadow side, loneliness, unseen threats, and secrets that can never be told. Yet, deep down, Maya yearned for one thing above all, that someday, just once, her father would stand beside her in front of others, proud of her as she was of him, so the truth would no longer be a joke, and her pain would no longer have to stay hidden. The nights at the Carter home were usually peaceful, but now that same stillness pressed on Maya like a suffocating chill. After a dinner filled with tears, she tried to lose herself in her math homework, but the numbers danced before her eyes. In her mind, the taunts at school and the alien stares on the street kept returning, winding around her thoughts like drifting smoke. Beyond her window, the neighborhood lay asleep, save for a few street lamps casting a warm yellow glow onto the cold pavement. In that hush, Maya heard her father's voice behind the closed office door, tense, sharp, more urgent than usual. She crept closer, pressing her ear to the wood, and caught fragments of his words. "No, I can't accept that level of risk. We need to lock down the entire system, especially around Jefferson. Yes, we're facing an unprecedented threat, and I refuse to let any of the kids or their families be put in danger." His tone dropped to a whisper, and Maya couldn't make out the rest, except for one word that struck her like lightning. Jefferson. Her small heart pounded. She realized that her unease wasn't just born of cruel rumors at school, but of a very real danger lurking out there. That night, long after midnight, Maya lay wide awake. She slipped to the window, drawing back the curtain without thinking. Beneath the dim streetlight, a familiar black SUV sat silently across the road, its headlights flicking off the moment she looked. Inside, a man in a dark suit moved with precise economy, his eyes scanning the block. He spoke softly into a walkie-talkie, then fixed a cold gaze on the Carter house, lingering longest on Maya's window. Fear overwhelmed her. She bolted to her father's room, tears streaming as she gasped out, "Dad, there's someone outside. They've been watching our house for days. I'm so scared." Jonathan, at his computer strewn with lines of encrypted code and digital maps, leapt up the instant he heard her. He wrapped her in a protective embrace, studying her face before gently stroking her hair. His voice was low and firm. "Maya, some things in this world are best left unknown. Sometimes safety comes from trust and letting adults handle it." But his words only heightened her anxiety. She wasn't a carefree child anymore. Her father's protective shield had begun to crack, the tension in his voice, the worry in his eyes when he glanced out the window, the secretive codes on his screen, and those silent figures outside in the night. In Maya's heart, fear had taken on a new shape, a darkness both vague and concrete, seeping into every corner of her soul. The wounds from school hadn't healed before they merged with threats from the adult world. That night, she curled under her blankets, tossing and turning until dawn, haunted by one persistent question. Are there truths more dangerous than lies? And when will this darkness finally leave our family? Outside, the black SUV remained, unmoving and silent, a chilling reminder that at Jefferson Academy, darkness isn't just rumor. It's already begun to circle its smallest targets. The next morning, with last night's fear still clinging to her, Maya trudged into Jefferson Academy weighed down by a knot of anxiety she couldn't name. The halls gleamed under bright lights, but beneath that shine hung a thick fog of prejudice, an invisible haze only Maya and Layla truly felt. No sooner had she stepped into the classroom than she sensed the eager, whispering stares, as if yesterday's spectacle hadn't provided enough entertainment. From the front of the room, Miss Anderson surveyed her with a cool, triumphant gleam. She didn't need to speak. One sideways glance or half-smile was enough to warn Maya that today would be hardly better than yesterday. As usual, Miss Anderson found a way to single her out. "Class," she announced sweetly, "Maya gave us such a special story yesterday. Surely today you have more thrilling details about the Pentagon to share, Maya." Tittering rippled through the room. Maya hesitated, then remembered Layla's encouraging eyes and her father's reminder to stand tall. She squared her shoulders and lifted her chin. "Good morning, Miss Anderson, everyone," she began in a clear voice. "I've done some research on the Pentagon. For example, it has twice the usual number of restrooms because, when it was built in 1940, Virginia's segregation laws required separate facilities for white people and people of color. When those laws were later repealed, all the restrooms were left as they were, a reminder of America's past. The class fell silent, genuine curiosity replacing mockery. For the first time, Maya's confidence wasn't met with laughter. Her facts made the old jokes sound awkward and out of place. She pressed on, growing warmer in tone. And another fun fact. At the Pentagon Center is a famous sausage stand that, during the Cold War, the Soviets once targeted for missile strikes, thinking it was a secret underground bunker, when it was really just people grabbing lunch. A ripple of real laughter broke out. Even Tyler, who'd led the teasing, couldn't help but click his tongue in surprise. In that moment, Maya felt in control of her story instead of being its victim. But the antagonist refused defeat. Miss Anderson's expression hardened. She tapped the desk to reclaim her authority. Fascinating, Maya, but as I've said, presentations should be based on facts, not tall tales. If your father truly works at the Pentagon, why not invite him to next week's Parents' Day? That would settle any doubts, wouldn't it? Her challenge was a carefully set trap, her eyes glinting like a predator waiting for prey to stumble. The class buzzed again, a mixture of curiosity and hungry anticipation for a public reveal. Maya's heart thundered. She bit her lip and, voice barely above a whisper, replied, "All right, my dad will come." After class, Layla pulled her aside, concern in her voice. "Are you sure?" "She hates you, and she's setting you up in front of everyone." But Maya knew, if she never faced them, her truth would remain a lonely shadow amid that powerful crowd. She walked home in heavy silence, her heart heavy, but her resolve firm. It was time for light to pierce through that choking fog, at least for her own sake. That night, in her small room, Maya wrote her father a letter, pleading with him to appear at the assembly, even if only for a moment. Outside her window, the black SUV sat silent like the darkness closing in. Yet in Maya's chest, a small flame of hope and courage burned brighter than ever. She refused to let that invisible haze swallow her truth. The guilt and worry hovered over Maya like a gray cloud all afternoon, until she finally mustered the courage to sit down across from her father in their warm kitchen, where cups of mint tea and the soft clink of spoons always formed the safest backdrop for their conversations. This time, Maya held nothing back. She told him everything. The vicious jokes from her classmates, the subtle contempt in Miss Anderson's gaze, the isolation that followed her, and the public challenge about Parents' Day that felt like a trap with no escape. Her voice trembled at times and grew firm at others, breaking completely at the end. "Dad, I can't take it anymore. At school, they all think I'm lying, just because I'm different, but I'm proud of you. I just want people to know the truth. I want to be acknowledged." Jonathan was silent for a long moment. His gentle eyes turned hard and deep, like hidden currents beneath a calm surface. He looked at his daughter and saw not just a hurt child, but a young woman longing for respect, desperate to be herself among so many masked faces of privilege. He squeezed Maya's shoulder gently, his voice low, but charged with a barely contained anger. "I'm sorry, Maya. I should have been there sooner, so you wouldn't have to face this alone. But today, I promise you, I will come to Parents' Day. It's time they learn the truth. It's time you stop feeling ashamed of who you are and who your father is." For the first time in days, as darkness closed in around her, Maya felt a small light break through her fear, the power of her father's faith in her. That night, Maya stayed up late. As she passed her father's office, she saw a green glow beneath the door. Curious, she cracked it open and peeked inside. Jonathan was intently researching on his screen, not his usual classified reports, but personnel files for Jefferson Academy, Miss Anderson's portrait photo, detailed notes on her career history, and records of her community activities. This was no longer Jonathan Carter, the secretive national security specialist. This was a father using every skill and privilege he had to protect his daughter's honor, her future, and the truth. Outside the window, the black SUV had returned, an ever-present phantom in the night. But this time, Maya felt no fear. She quietly closed the curtain and slipped back to her room, comforted by a newfound peace. She was no longer alone. After days of cold isolation, she had an unshakable anchor. Her father's steadfast gaze and his ironclad promise, "I will be there, and the truth will come to light." In the darkness of that night, courage began to grow, not from grand speeches, but from a simple promise a father made to his daughter. The weekend sun only made Jefferson Academy look more grand and imposing. Its gates stood wide open, luxury cars lined up like jewels, and on the manicured lawn, designer suits and dresses mingled with the polite smiles of the social elite. Parents' Day wasn't just a chance for moms and dads to show off their accomplishments. It was where hidden networks of power were woven. And in that sea of glittering faces, Maya remained a lone, silent figure. But today she didn't shrink behind the crowd. Hand in hand with her father, she strode through the gates, feeling every curious, astonished, and judgmental gaze upon them. Jonathan Carter, sharp in a navy suit, standing tall and steady, his eyes cool and unyielding, wore a Pentagon security badge and an unmistakable emblem on his lapel. Beyond the gates, anyone paying attention would spot a few black SUVs parked discreetly, security personnel silently monitoring through earpieces. The hallway leading to room 112 fell into an almost eerie hush. None of the distinguished parents who'd heard Maya mention her father could have imagined this sight. A tall black man radiating leadership, his gaze firm, his calm authority undeniable. Even the other teachers paused, a flicker of unease crossing their faces at the gleam of his badge under the fluorescent lights. His mere presence, without a word, was enough to shake an atmosphere long accustomed to the haughty power handed down through generations. Inside the classroom, laughter and chatter filled the air, until Maya and her father appeared at the threshold. Ms. Anderson, standing with a cluster of powerful parents, saw her carefully cultivated smile freeze. Her eyes darted from Maya to Jonathan, and she stood momentarily stunned. She could hardly believe her eyes. The man Maya had spoken of, once mocked by both teacher and students as a janitor or guard at the Pentagon, now stood before them, exuding an authority no one dared challenge. The triumphant smile on Miss Anderson's face vanished, replaced by worry and confusion. The wealthy parents, so proud of their economic clout, fell silent, yielding the floor to true authority, the invisible yet overwhelming power of national security. Jonathan gently rested his hand on Maya's shoulder, nodding politely to each parent with a composed confidence. When his gaze met Miss Anderson's, she nearly dropped the folder in her hands, hastily restoring her poise, though her voice trembled. "Mr. Carter, it's truly an honor to welcome you to Jefferson Academy. I never expected—" He offered a courteous smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, which seemed to see right through every layer of social pretense. "Thank you, Miss Anderson. Maya has told me so much about you and this school. I look forward to hearing from you today, about your educational philosophy and how students are truly treated here." A ripple of whispers ran through the room, the tension suddenly so thick it was nearly tangible. Tyler, the boy who'd once led the teasing, slunk back behind his mother. Layla, Maya's one steadfast ally, looked at the Carters with a mix of respect and relief. Maya felt the power shift in that room. All the invisible biases, the unspoken judgments, the sneers, they evaporated, replaced by genuine respect and caution. No one dared mock or question her father's role anymore. Even Miss Anderson, the self-proclaimed queen of the classroom, who once controlled the atmosphere with sarcasm, stood subdued, her brash confidence nowhere to be found. In that moment, Maya felt she had grown up 1,000-fold. She was no longer the girl dismissed and belittled, no longer the target of cruel rumors. She had a voice, a place, and it all started with her courage to face the truth, her father's promise, and his powerful presence today. That Parents' Day, Jefferson Academy witnessed more than the arrival of a Pentagon father. It saw the collapse of outdated prejudices and sounded a wake-up call to the real value of dignity and self-respect, things no designer suit or clandestine power network could ever buy. The tension in the classroom lingered as Principal Hayes entered, his face a mixture of emotion and careful restraint. He quickly took in the scene, glancing at Maya and Jonathan before pausing on the Pentagon security badge pinned to Jonathan's lapel. The principal recognized immediately that this was a defining moment, not just for one student, but for the honor and future of Jefferson Academy. He offered a warm smile, though his eyes were full of respect, and invited Jonathan to speak to the class. We are very fortunate today to welcome a truly exceptional parent, Mr. Jonathan Carter, a national security expert currently serving at the Pentagon. Mr. Carter, would you please share a few words with our students and parents about the importance of respect and trust? Jonathan rose and walked to the front with measured steps, each one carrying the weight of lifelong values. He didn't boast or resort to grandiloquence. Instead, he scanned the room, paused to lock eyes with Maya in a silent show of support, and then spoke in a clear, steady voice. I can't tell you exactly what I do each day. That falls under national security clearance. But one thing I can share. National security isn't just about iron walls and coded locks. It's about trust, unity, and mutual respect. Whenever we judge someone by their appearance, their skin color, or their background, we create dangerous blind spots. Bad actors know how to exploit those blind spots to infiltrate our society and our systems. He paused, holding the gaze of every teacher, parent, and student before emphasizing, I've seen the terrible consequences when people doubt and demean each other out of prejudice. A community, a nation, or a school will remain weak if prejudice rules the day. But if each of us dares to ask questions and stand up for truth and compassion, our entire system grows stronger every day. The room fell utterly silent. Teachers accustomed to leaning on their credentials bowed their heads in thought. Wealthy parents, once so proudly self-assured, shifted in their seats, suddenly sheepish or uneasy. And the students, especially Maya, felt a new surge of energy, strength, confidence, and a willingness to confront the darkness of bias. Even Tyler, who had led the jeering, dared only to stare at his desk, his face flushed with embarrassment. Truth, once revealed beyond denial, has a way of returning people to their best selves, or forcing them to reckon with their own shame. In the back corner, Miss Anderson stood pale and trembling. All her usual confidence and her covert authority, wielded so often through sarcasm, had nowhere left to cling. With keen awareness, Principal Hayes stepped toward Maya and gently placed a hand on her shoulder, offering a silent acknowledgement and apology. Thank you, Maya, for having the courage to speak the truth. And thank you, Mr. Carter, for giving us a lesson no textbook ever could. From that moment on, the way everyone looked at Maya changed. There was no more doubt or ridicule, only respect, admiration, and most importantly, trust. Maya had reclaimed her own dignity, and in doing so helped transform the very culture of Jefferson Academy, awakening self-respect in every student and teacher. The seed of respect had been sown, not through material power, but through the power of truth and the courage to shatter unjust prejudice. The tense hush that had settled over the classroom after Jonathan's powerful words, just as everyone was stirring with admiration, was shattered by a piercing alarm. The emergency siren wailed in frantic bursts, ripping apart the polished veneer of Jefferson Academy and sending every heartbeat pounding like thunder. In an instant, the power cut out. The lights snapped off, leaving only the flickering red glow of emergency lamps to cast the room in chaos and dread. Worried eyes darted about, hands shook, and distant screams echoed down the hall. The school's aristocratic order collapsed like a house of cards, exposing the raw survival instinct beneath. The door to room 112 burst open, and uniformed security officers flooded in, their dark uniforms and steely gazes snapping every head to attention. A team of fully armed FBI agents and tactical officers with earpieces began sealing off the building, ordering students, parents, and teachers to stay put, pull down the blinds, and lock the doors behind them. Jonathan instantly shifted into mission mode. He drew Maya close, his eyes fierce but steady, signaling for her to remain calm. Around them, once proud CEOs and lawyers stood aghast. No one remembered their own power or prestige. The teachers floundered, clearly out of their depth. Amid the turmoil, Jonathan's phone buzzed with an encrypted alert. A single dispatch froze his blood. Confirmed. Foreign espionage cell has infiltrated. Military-grade surveillance devices and possible explosive devices discovered at Jefferson. Targets are children of senior security personnel. Maya Carter is priority target number 1. Immediate coordination required. All the scattered clues clicked into place. The heightened security last week, the unmarked SUVs parked at the house, the late-night encrypted calls. Now he realized he was not only Maya's father but also the front line of a very real war, one where the enemy was ruthless, international, and bent on silence. FBI teams fanned out, checking rosters, verifying identities, and securing every high-risk student. Maya, pale with fear, gripped her father's hand as Layla and other children huddled together, eyes wide in the strobing red light and pounding silence. Meanwhile, Ms. Anderson, once the iron-handed ruler of this classroom, shook uncontrollably, murmuring, "Please, everyone, stay calm. Stay calm." Yet she was the most terrified of all. Tyler and the other affluent students, previously so smug, now clung to their parents, sobbing like any frightened child. Seizing every second, Jonathan leaned near Maya's ear and whispered, "Remember what I told you. Stay calm. Stay aware. Don't let go of my hand no matter what happens." In the hall outside, it looked like a battlefield. Tactical units sweeping each room, uncovering hidden devices attached to cameras and electronic locks. The bomb squad raced to the basement after tracing suspicious wiring and radio signals to the maintenance area. On the school's security monitors, a map blinked with VIP locations. Maya Carter's name highlighted in red among the offspring of national defense leaders. Principal Hayes, usually the image of composure, now looked to Jonathan with pleading eyes. "Mr. Carter, what do we do? Is everyone safe?" Jonathan didn't answer immediately. His gaze flicked to the windows, to possible exits, to the positions of the agents, his mind running through tactical protocols he'd refined on the world's most sensitive missions. The reality of modern warfare, enemy forces striking at the heart of what should be safe, was written in every line of his battle-hardened face. In that once elegant classroom, Maya and her father, formerly the object of ridicule, stood at the epicenter of danger, yet also of resolve, intellect, and courage. A new darkness had descended on Jefferson Academy, and this fight was no longer about petty prejudices, but a struggle between life and death, national security and transnational crime. At its heart stood Maya Carter, the focal point of every threat and now the beacon of hope and survival. The emergency sirens still screamed through Jefferson Academy. The once proud parents huddled in the classroom now glanced toward Maya, who'd become more than the center of attention for her father's story. She was a living target for whoever was out there. Every passing minute ratcheted up the fear, turning the entire school into a suffocating Cold War zone. Just minutes after security sealed off the building, Maya felt someone unfamiliar edge close in the chaos. A maintenance worker in a gray jacket and low-brimmed cap, eyes darting, slipped through the crowd and approached her with unsettling purpose. The turmoil was so great that hardly anyone, least of all a trembling Miss Anderson in the corner, noticed. But Jonathan Carter, seasoned intelligence commander, recognized the threat instantly. The worker had no ID badge, wore thin gloves for no reason, and his eyes held the steely focus of a trained operative. Danger flared in Jonathan's instincts as both father and warrior. In a heartbeat, the stranger grasped Maya's wrist and started to pull her toward the back door. Terrified, Maya realized, "No, I can't be separated from everyone." At that moment, Jonathan lunged forward, positioning himself between Maya and the intruder, his eyes hard as steel. "What do you want?" Jonathan asked, his voice steady but powerful. The spy sneered, drawing a folding knife and pressing its cold blade against Maya's side, his accent tinged with Eastern European menace. "Carter, hand over the classified intel, or this child will never leave here alive. Don't play the hero. You know exactly what I'll do." Time slowed as Maya summoned every lesson her father had taught her about observing threats and staying calm under life-and-death pressure. She held her breath, not daring to make a sound, feeling the knife's chill against her ribs. Jonathan caught her eye, then locked his gaze on the spy, signaling silently to Agent Ramirez, who'd blended into the hallway behind them. Outside, FBI and tactical teams were in position, but Jonathan knew that one false move would doom Maya. The room's tension was nearly physical as the spy hissed, "One alarm, one move from any of you and I'll kill her." Jonathan swallowed his fear and extended the standoff. "Relax, you don't have to do this. We can negotiate. I have resources you can't imagine." "Don't lie to me. Information or her life. What is it you want? Why target my daughter?" The spy's lips curled in a cruel smile. "We know who you are, and we know this child is your greatest weakness, Carter." In the hallway, Agent Ramirez moved into position, weapon ready. Jonathan shot a quick nod to Maya, their secret signal from self-defense training. 2 blinks meant duck and move left. Maya's heart pounded, sweat slicking her palm, but her eyes were determined. The other students and Miss Anderson stood frozen, watching the unfolding drama in stunned silence. "What's your choice, Carter?" the spy demanded. I'll trade. But let her go back to class. You know the FBI has the building locked. There's no escape." The spy hesitated, realizing he couldn't simply withdraw. In that split second, Jonathan blinked twice. Maya ducked under the knife's arc and rolled to the side. Just as Ramirez burst in, gun trained on the attacker. Panicked, the spy lunged after Maya but was pinned to the floor by Jonathan's expert hold. Ramirez cuffed him before he could recover. The FBI swarmed in, escorting the assailant out as parents and students exhaled in relief, breaking into applause and tears. Miss Anderson collapsed into her chair, pale and trembling, whispering, I never imagined." Maya shook, but her eyes shone with pride and gratitude. She was no longer a helpless victim. She had survived the nightmare. In that moment, the real power of courage and intellect blazed brightest in the darkness. In a school once defined by privilege and prejudice, a true battle had been fought, and Maya, her father, and those who stood against evil had redefined strength and the true worth of every human being. The tense silence that followed the breathtaking rescue hadn't even begun to lift when the classroom held its collective breath, watching Maya's every move. In that pivotal moment, instead of panicking or crying like most children would, Maya remained fully composed, recalling every lesson her father had taught her about facing danger. Never freeze in fear. Sometimes a single reflex can mean the difference between life and death. With keen eyes, Maya quietly assessed her kidnapper's grip on the knife, noting the moment his attention wavered toward the door. She executed the self-defense signal Jonathan had drilled into her since she was 8. She drove her elbow sharply into the spy's hip, then tumbled to the floor just out of his reach. Time seemed to stand still. Never missing a beat, Jonathan sprang into action, clamping down on the spy's wrist and expertly disarming him with a precise arm lock. An FBI agent's authoritative shout rang out at the same instant. "Freeze! Drop your weapon!" The classroom door blasted open as tactical teams burst in like a tidal wave, subduing the entire infiltration cell and neutralizing every threat. Within seconds, those who had spread terror were handcuffed and dragged into the cold hallway, their eyes wild with shock and rage. In that moment, Maya collapsed into her father's arms, her shoulders trembling from both emotion and exhaustion. Jonathan held her tight and whispered, "I'm so proud of you. No one can hurt you when you know how to stand up and defend yourself." Everyone who had witnessed the scene, students, parents, teachers, stood in stunned silence, realizing that the girl they'd long dismissed had shown extraordinary calm, courage, and quick thinking. Suddenly, Maya became the school's focal point. News outlets swiftly picked up the story of an unprecedented attack at the city's most prestigious academy, lauding the bravery of the little black girl who had faced down a blade and, together with her father and law enforcement, turned the tide against a deadly plot. That day, Jefferson Academy ceased to be merely a haven of privilege and prejudice. It witnessed a historic turning point. Maya, once isolated and mocked, emerged as a young hero, a living testament to the power of courage, intelligence, and unwavering will. In the corner, Miss Anderson sat paler than ever, her eyes hollow. For the first time, she was no longer in control, but a witness to her own prejudices' downfall. All her former arrogance and condescension had evaporated, replaced by shame. Finally, before the entire class and the whole school, she managed a heartfelt apology. "Maya, I'm sorry. I was wrong about you, about your family, about everything." Maya looked directly at her teacher, no longer tearful but radiant with pride, and replied, "What matters is that we're willing to change, Miss Anderson. I don't want anyone else to have to go through what I did." Her classmates burst into applause. Layla rushed forward and hugged Maya in tears of joy. Even Tyler, the boy who had once led the taunts, stepped up, his voice shaky. I'm sorry, I was wrong. You're the strongest person in this class." True worth, they learned, isn't measured by background, power, or skin color. It's defined by courage, honesty, and the strength to rise above prejudice. Maya had triumphed not only over a visible foe but over the invisible shadows of bias that had haunted her for years. In that moment, justice was restored at Jefferson Academy, and Maya Carter, once a ridiculed shadow, became the emblem of bravery, conscience and hope for an entire generation of students. The atmosphere at Jefferson Academy never felt the same after that day. That evening, the city stayed awake as social media and news outlets exploded with headlines: kidnapping, plot against intelligence officer's daughter, foiled by courage and wit. The iconic photo of Maya beside her father, her eyes still rimmed with tears, but her smile proud, dominated every front page. Jonathan was hailed as a heroic father and a covert defender of the nation, yet he quietly told reporters, "I did only what any parent would do when their child is in danger. The real courage belongs to Maya." Within the week, the FBI held a press conference confirming that the espionage cell they'd captured was tied to an organization Jonathan had once battled as commander of overseas special operations. This attack had been more than a threat to national secrets. It was a personal vendetta aimed at his greatest vulnerability, Maya. The revelation stunned the community. Parents, teachers, and students alike finally understood. Safety and justice are no one's exclusive privilege, and no one should ever be underestimated because of their skin color or background. Principal Hayes, visibly shaken, addressed the entire school to announce comprehensive reforms. Jefferson Academy will never allow such a breach to happen again. Security measures are now at their highest level. Starting next semester, every student will take mandatory courses on combating racism, honoring diversity, and recognizing bias, integral parts of our curriculum. I am honored to appoint Maya Carter, our bravest student ever, as Student Ambassador for Inclusion and Equity, giving voice to our school's renewed commitment to respect and belonging. The auditorium fell silent as Maya stepped up to the podium. Once the outsider, she was now a living symbol, her presence erasing the old lines between privilege and difference. Her eyes sparkled with pride as she took the microphone and spoke, steady and clear for the first time. "I used to be terrified of speaking the truth about my family, afraid of being mocked or shunned, but yesterday the lessons my father taught me about courage and honesty helped me overcome it all. The truth always matters, even if it costs us isolation or tears, and if we're brave enough to face it, the truth becomes the light that guides justice and compassion." Then Ms. Anderson, the embodiment of the school's old elite mindset, stepped forward and addressed the entire student body. "I publicly apologize to Maya Carter. I viewed her through the lens of prejudice instead of honoring her truth and individual worth. I will be the first to enroll in the anti-bias training, and I propose a new course on the value of truth for every student. We must relearn how to trust, how to listen, and how to stand for justice, even when that means confronting our own mistakes." Her apology wasn't just to Maya, but to an entire generation of students once cast aside for being different. Many parents wiped away tears as teachers bowed their heads in solemn agreement. Maya replied without anger, simply, "I accept your apology, but what matters more is that we all change, so that no one else suffers as I have." From that day forward, Jefferson Academy transformed. Mandatory diversity and inclusion courses became part of the core curriculum. Maya was named student coordinator, leading initiatives to inspire respect and combat bullying and exclusion. Teachers, parents, and administrators underwent training to identify and eliminate hidden biases. The school's culture shifted daily. Whispers, taunts, and mocking laughter gave way to genuine listening and mutual respect. Maya and Layla became celebrated ambassadors of diversity, while Tyler and the other former mockers actively joined community projects, owning up to their mistakes and committing to change. Maya Carter's impact now reached far beyond the girl once ostracized. She became the spark that ignited a humanistic revolution within a school that had once shut its doors on anyone who seemed different. She proved that justice, trust, and truth can reshape an entire system, powered by nothing more than the simple courage and love of one family. The atmosphere at Jefferson Academy has shifted so profoundly that even its longest-standing members are amazed. The invisible walls of privilege, prejudice, and appearances can no longer keep the children apart. Maya Carter, once relegated to the shadows of the hallways, is now the living emblem of a new generation at this once exclusive school. No one sees Maya merely as the hero's daughter, or that one minority exception anymore. She commands genuine respect, not because of her father's protection, but because of her unwavering courage in the face of bias, her willingness to confront danger, and her resolve to stand up for the truth. Those who once mocked, doubted, or turned away now seek her out, not just to apologize, but to learn, listen, and help build a new culture of equality, respect, and hope. The Carter family has grown stronger through the storm. Jonathan, once a man of unspoken national security secrets, now opens his heart more freely to his daughter, understanding that a father's greatest strength lies not only in protecting, but in placing unshakable trust in his child. Maya, too, no longer hesitates to speak of her father or her family. She proudly shares Jonathan's story with friends, unafraid to let her own experiences inspire others, even though that once left her vulnerable. Beyond merely overcoming adversity, Maya has ignited her peers with the Beyond Appearances initiative. She stands before the entire school, the media, and even those who once hurt her, challenging everyone to combat prejudice and to diversify their community. Through her lived example and steadfast conviction, Maya has empowered students who once felt invisible, those too afraid to speak up, by showing them how to find and use their own voices. Layla, Maya's friend who suffered backlash simply for standing by her, now serves as Maya's right hand in every community project. Even Tyler and his circle of wealthy classmates, who once led the ridicule, have stepped forward to join these efforts, earnestly reflecting on their own biases and vowing to change. Today, class meetings and the schoolyard buzz, not around gossip but around Maya, not as the center of attention but as the centerpiece of trust and inspiration. Many teachers, including Ms. Anderson, have genuinely transformed. Not content with mere apologies, they now actively share their past mistakes and mentor the next generation to rise above prejudice. Jefferson Academy, once a fortress of privilege, has become a model of reform. A place where marginalized voices are heard and where a black girl can stand as a beacon of conscience and authentic growth. At home each evening, Maya confidently tells her parents about her achievements, new friendships, and ideas for the next project. Jonathan no longer lives in fear of shielding her from danger. He knows that, after everything, his daughter has truly matured, knows how to defend herself, and continues to spread love. The final lesson of this story isn't just for Jefferson Academy but for our entire society. Truth, courage, and love are the most powerful weapons to conquer prejudice, protect the vulnerable, and inspire a generation toward justice, compassion, and true maturity. And Maya's greatest legacy will not be the scars left by a battle for justice, but the belief she instilled that no matter how different someone may seem, everyone deserves respect, love, and the chance to shine in this world. If you found this story meaningful, please hit like, share, and subscribe so we can spread these human values, and stay tuned for more moving, meaningful stories ahead.